So it's my pleasure to introduce our closing keynote speaker, Stefan Ching. I mean, Stefan is part of the Devoxx program committee as well. I mean, he's our bridge also towards a lot of Oracle engineers, but you know, he has a lot of other people that he knows via the night hacking and so on. So Stefan, it's all yours.
Thank you, Stefan. So before I start the presentation, I just wanted to say how much of an honor it is to speak here to you guys. I think I've been coming to the Devoxx conference for the past 7 years. Started out just as a little, scrub, trying to do my little presentations and prepare them the night before. Started helping out the program committee, helping behind the scenes here, and this is really one of the best community conference in the world. So big hand to the program committee and these guys. They do an awesome job. And what I want to talk to you guys a little about today is the past 20 years of Java. So in the year 1995, what were you guys doing in the year 95? All right, so it's kind of a rhetorical question. I don't expect everyone to answer, but here are some of the things which were happening in the year 1995, just to kind of ground things. So this was the year the first bionic eye was implanted. So this was kind of the bleeding edge research at the time. World records for number of people set in space, although we apparently have given up on that and we just stick robots in space now. Financial markets reaching record highs, so it was clearly boom year. Handheld gaming devices burst forth. Actually, I have a little handheld gaming device here. This actually is an empty shell of a handheld gaming device that we were printing, and somebody else is going to walk away because I don't have room in my luggage for this. So somebody else in the room here will walk away with that one. DVD optical discs were announced, and internet usage grew. So this was clearly a groundbreaking year for lots of things, including the introduction of Java. But if you look at it, we've had quite a history of different Java releases. So help me out in the room here. I know if you're in the overflow rooms, this isn't quite as easy. So we're going to play what was the earliest version of Java that you use. So everyone stand up for a sec, in place. So just stand up at your chairs. All right, so this is stretching before the movies. This is so you don't fall asleep during the James Bond flick this evening. So who here, if your first Java programming version was 1.6, you can sit down now. Okay, so we have a lot of people who have been around for a while. How about 1.5? If your first version was 1.5, sit down. Okay, a few more. 1.4. All right, so how about 1.3? Now that was all the ME developers who just sat down, who were stuck on 1.4 for generations. How about 1.2? Oh, all right. Okay, so for the audience, we have a lot, 10% still standing with 1.2. 1.1. Okay, now we still got about 10%. Who programmed on the initial Java 1.0? All right, everyone else sit down. Thank you guys. Give yourselves a round of applause. So all the guys who are standing at the end there, you guys are really the pillars that have made Java successful. And one of the great things about the Java community is the engagement and the fact that everybody was involved really early on. Actually, I started with 1.0 at Carnegie Mellon University, programming in IDE. And I've stuck with it ever since. So hopefully some of you guys who are standing also have great stories to share. Might be a good one for a quickie next year. Yeah. Okay, so here are some of the milestones. Java actually started way before 95. The Green project began in 91. Duke was born in 92. The Mosaic, just to put things in reference, the Mosaic browser came out in 93. The Java compiler WebRunner came out in 94, and it wasn't until 95 when the Java programming language was actually announced. So to give us a little bit more insight into the early days of Java, I sat with James. We sat down at his Liquid Robotics had a nice little chat, and this is what James had to say about the very early days of the Java programming language.
So the Green Project, being a bunch of engineers, we were, trying to figure out what was going on in this space, but, rather than just study stuff. And we did a fair amount of that. I mean, we did a lot of like road trips to Japan and road trips to Europe, and we talked to people at a whole lot of different countries and companies, and we bought toys, played with toys, did the usual sort of engineer things. But then as we were trying to really understand what was going on, we felt it was better to actually build something. And so we decided to build something that was kind of like a home remote control. A tablet that was linked to devices in the neighborhood, and the easiest things to tie into were like televisions and VCRs and such. So we built a thing called the Star 7, which was kind of a prototype handheld. It was sort of an iPad, decades before the iPad.
So this is a short video of what the actual Star 7 device looks like. So James,
hello, I'm James.
He didn't have much more hair, but at least his hair was a little bit
Star
more
7.
colorful.
Star 7
And this is the
were
physical
built
Star
as part of the
7
Green
device.
Project at Southern
They hammered this
in
together. They would rip
1991,
apart old
1992.
Nintendos and
These are a prototype
some
handheld
to grab
device
LCD screens
that was
and
built to
radio
do some
antennas,
explorations
because
to
they
make
didn't
use of
actually have
consumer
readily available
electronics.
parts that they
The
could
Star
utilize.
7 is,
And the actual display leveraged Duke, who you guys are quite
that
familiar
booklet
with,
actually contains
as the
a complete
avatar
user's manual.
for it. And you would click on items in it using a touch screen. So this kind of felt and acted a lot
In the
like
living room,
a
there are a
very
variety of
early
objects.
version
One
of the iPad. So here's a little bit of trivia for you as well. So the iPad, the hardware engineers who worked on the iPad, a bunch of them were actually the same guys that were part of the Green team. So Apple doesn't like to divulge their secrets. The guys who worked on the hardware project are now sworn to secrecy in some Apple basement. But actually, this is a proper successor. It was the same hardware engineers working on it. So pretty cool that very early on, Java had its roots in a real embedded platform. But you might be wondering yourself, why does the Java language, they developed the Java language specifically for this handheld device, why does it look so much like C and C++? So I asked James about this, kind of on why he chose this, and this was his answer.
And all their engineers, they understood C, and that was kind of it. So it had to be kind of culturally compatible with that universe. As I started building it and then fixing things, and it's like pretty soon it only vaguely looked like C++. And at some point I just gave up on trying to be compatible and on trying to just do the right thing.
Always do the right thing.
So I think James did a pretty good job with the language. What do you guys think? Yeah? So it's kind of interesting. James actually, he hand wrote compiler 0, which is what the very, very first version of Java was out. Compiler 1 was written by Arthur. Compiler 2, actually, does anyone know this, where compiler 2 came from? Let me give you a hint. Scala? Yeah, Martin Odersky. Okay, we got some very smart people in the audience. But Java really has a rich history and really was marked by a lot of the language decisions which Gosling put in place very early. So in '95 was when the announcement actually happened. Netscape was released. Early IDEs like Semantic Visual Cafe came out just in the first year. This was also the Java in a nutshell, the predecessor to Javadoc. 1.1 was released. Sun Tzu's Microsoft in '97. 1.2 was released. The JCP was formed. Thinking in Java was released, and then J2EE 1.2 was released in '99. So this takes us into kind of the midpoint of Java, and this is the question I always have for folks is, after 20 years, looking back at the language, what would you have done differently if you could do anything?
So what things would I have done differently? I mean, there's kind of a long list. If I was just building something for myself, so on my list of things I would like just for me is operator overloading. I do a reasonable amount of math, and operator overloading is really nice for that. One of the things that sort of happened was that there was a lot of people kind of in the ecosystem, in the area that had a lot of experience with operator overloading in C. And I'd actually implemented operator overloading twice over the years. I implemented it once in compiler 0 and then once in compiler 2. But the issue with operator overloading is that it's really easy to abuse. When you look at what people do with C++, when you start using these shift operators for input-output, it's kind of crazy. And then when people start using plus equals for list insertion, and then it gets crazier from there. Whenever I would start writing emails about, we really should do operator overloading, I would get really angry people stomping into my office. It's like, no!
To me, is unacceptable. You see?
Yeah, so it's probably a good thing he didn't add operator overloading in. I would have hated to see him get beat up by Adam Sandler. But it's kind of interesting that lots of features which we're either missing from the language or which are things which as developers we saw come in much later were actually introduced fairly early on as prototypes and experiments. And I think one of the things which sets Java apart as a language is the fact that a lot of feature explosion in the language didn't happen early on, so that helped it to have better backwards compatibility and mature better as a language. You can look at other examples of languages where they added too many features early on, Python, and then they had this explosion of incompatibilities in later versions, which actually make it much harder to release, to build enterprise software on top of it. So anyway, the road to modern Java, kind of years 2000 through 2004. So NetBeans happened, was open source. Javopolis. Oh wait, anyone know what Javopolis is? That's kind of a weird. Oh, Devoxx. Yeah, so I'm very glad that even though, well, I guess since I'm not working for Oracle, even though we didn't do the right thing with the name, that you guys kept the conference and kept things strong with the Java focus. So kudos again to the local team here for making things happen. But this is one of the big community conferences, which I think is an important milestone in the Java ecosystem and in the lifespan of Java. And I'm putting it right beside J2EE and all the other big achievements. So I think this is the right place and the right setting for discussing 20 years of Java. So J2EE 1.3, JRuby was released, Eclipse 1.0, 2002, BA acquired AVM. Anyone know anything about this? It probably doesn't look very interesting, but this is actually where JRocket came from. And then later was acquired by Oracle. So that's where the original Stockholm team came, which is doing a lot of the compiler work now. 1.4 was released in 2003, J2E 1.4 was released, and then finally 1.5, which that's probably, before Lambdas, this was really the biggest language change which happened in the Java ecosystem. So a little bit later, anything that Gosling regrets adding to the language. And I'm sure you guys have your things which you might consider, but I think it's interesting to get a take from the founder of the language.
I mean, there were some things that got added to Java over the years that felt like they were done to sort of placate people who were just whining. And probably pretty high on my list is Printf, and those the sort of C-style formatting strings.
So I would have never guessed this.
Never been a fan of Printf. It just has all kinds of issues. I personally tend to never use it. I tend to like sort of the kind of fluent style, where you do chained method calls. And, it always felt to me like the right answer was an interesting syntax for chained method calls. And I came up with several proposals for doing chained method calls, but people were really loud that it must be Printf. And, at some point, you just, it's like, pissing into the wind.
Go for it, man. Jump off the high dive. Stare down the barrel of the gun. Pee into the wind.
Yeah, Joe, I assure you, if I'm staring down the barrel of the gun, I'm going to be pretty much peeing every which way.
Who here actually? Who's a? Well, now that we've exposed Gosling's secret about which language he doesn't like, who agrees with him? Who thinks Printf was a bad idea? All right, a few. And anybody here who really likes, they really use Printf. They couldn't live without it. All right, so just to give you guys the results of the poll, we had about 20 people who agreed with Gosling, and we had one brave Saul who actually raised his hand. Kudos to you for sticking to your guns. I use Printf quite a bit as well because it's a handy way to get around number formatting issues in UI, so I use it for UI code. All right, so moving on, 2005 to 2009. So this was when the Java champions were formed. If you want to find more about that, then you have to come to the Insider Secrets BOF. We're not going to talk about that now. Beyond Java, which is a nice book right up there. Red Hat buys JBoss. 2007, Java EE 1.6 was released. Java EE 1.5. Oh, Java 1.6 and Java EE 1.5 were released. Java was open sourced in the initial J2ME release. 2008 is JavaFX, an Oracle-acquired BEA. And finally, Java EE 6 was released in 2009. So this is really the modern era of Java. And this is kind of when I got involved in Java as well, because my first foray into Java was doing JavaFX, or most first foray into book writing and speaking was JavaFX. I was doing Java for quite a while. So I thought it would be interesting to get James's take on client Java, since he's had a big hand in this over the years, working for Sun.
But something kind of happened in the late 90s, early aughts, where people started to believe that the only way to construct user interfaces was through the web. And the web works great for a bunch of things, but there are a bunch of things where it doesn't work well. And doing desktop programming really became a four-letter word. I mean, you kind of had to go into a back alley and kind of admit in whispers that you were doing desktop programming because it was so wrong. But everything had to be done with the web. And, you can do a lot of stuff with the web. The web's a beautiful thing. But if you try to build something like Photoshop or a good text editor, I mean, people have expended an immense amount of energy on building, text editor widgets in HTML. And they've come a long way. But if you put the best of them, side by side with, say, Pages from Apple or, Microsoft Word, there's just, it's just night and day. And so JavaFX was really designed for that universe. And it's really, really lovely. And I sure wish that a lot more people were using it. You should really give it a try. The kind of things you can do on a screen with JavaFX are really, really pretty amazing. And if you've got the kind of thing that requires tight interactive response or really high data density, it's really, really hard to do those things in HTML. Somewhere in between really hard and just outright impossible. Whereas, I show people, it's really been funny because I show people this app and it'll have, maps of the world, and I scroll around them, and there's no repaint tearing the way there is in, say, Google Maps. Scaling is absolutely fluid, and you can draw paths on the map that have hundreds of thousands of points, multiple paths that have hundreds of thousands of points, do all kinds of funny things overlaying it. And people go, how do you do that? Isn't that, you can't do that. And how do you, no, that doesn't work. It's like, yeah, you know, you grew up knowing only HTML. I'm sorry, there's a bigger world than HTML.
So I just wanted to highlight one thing. So if you guys have been doing any app development on mobile phones, this is kind of the new desktop, right? Doing apps on mobile and Android. And there's actually somebody in the audience here who's doing kind of bleeding edge cross-platform Java on those devices. You wanna stand up, Mr. Voss? Embarrass yourself. So Johan keeps a low profile, but he actually he's started a new company called Gluon, and he's doing exactly that. He's doing Java and Java effects running on Android and iOS and multiple mobile platforms. And it's great to see the community actually picking up what was started by James Gosling at Sun. This was really his vision for having a better framework for clients and Java. So, you know, you're talking about Java, we've been talking about Java Duke, and you know, what's with the little cute, adorable figure, which we see as the mascot of Java. And this is perhaps James's favorite part of the Java language, and this is the final James clip as well.
This sort of mascot, Duke, just showed up in T-shirts everywhere. I mean, you know, there's all these T-shirts that we did over the years. You know, Duke mice, another Duke mouse, Duke watch. Probably the craziest thing, the Duke-a-lele, the Duke on playing cards, the Chinese Duke, the Spanish bronze Duke, the Duke comic books. I mean, he sort of became the nexus of fun. You know, we had these great costumes, and he had just been really, really great. And it's really different for a corporation to embrace fun. And gotta hand it to Scott for tolerating the goofiness of Duke. But it was all good.
So here are some of the T-shirts in the back. So Duke with the world on him, Duke on a motorcycle, Duke destroying Doom, I guess. Was that one of the Doom characters? One of those 3D characters. Got swimming. This one is a little inside joke. What the heck is a glass cow? This is the classic painting, the mural that you'll see on James Gosling's homepage with the Duke Cafe. Duke driving down the street. So Duke is a whole lot of fun as a character, and the great thing which James did before he left is he made sure that it's an open source model that anybody can use and leverage in their own user groups. So I think James has given us a really great legacy, both in how he's developed the language, how he's left things in terms of the community and Duke and different things, and he's still engaged with the community, which is really awesome to see the founder that engaged even after leaving Oracle. So now we're going into the really, really recent years, 2012 through 2016. This is the Oracle era. Here's our buddy James, and I asked him a little bit to give us insights into the Java 8 platform. So here's George on the adoption of Java 8.
Java 8 is probably the biggest release that we've done, the most fundamental changes, because it involves changes to the language, the libraries, and underlying support in the VM that all kind of work together. So it's been nice to see the adoption of Java 8, which I think has been about the most rapid adoption of any of the major releases of Java. So it's kind of cool that you have this combination of fundamental change bringing about the ability to program in a completely new way for Java, but in a way that feels very, very natural for Java developers, not like something weird bolted on the side, and yet despite that large change, it also is something that people are embracing and sort of picking up quickly.
So there's a whole lot of different things to the Java 8 platform other than just Lambdas. That's probably the most significant one. But it was an entire API change to support Lambdas. There were JVM changes to support Lambdas as well. There were other features with flight recorder and mission control, which were done by the Stockholm team. Java FX 3D came out on the client side. A whole bunch of tooling improvements, profilers, and probably something which nobody's going to miss. Does anybody here miss PermGen? OK, I didn't see any hands go up. Thank you. So there were a whole bunch of different things which came in JDK 8 that made that a great release. And this was also one of the big language changes in the platform. But there's also another side of 8, which is what's coming in the upcoming Java EE 8. So I chatted a little bit with Bill Shannon, the Java EE architect, to get his take on what's in the upcoming Java EE 8 release.
We're doing a few things. One of them is this MVC Api. It's another web UI framework. It's different than JSF. For people who like that different style, I think that'll be very interesting to people. It's based on JAX-RS, which has proven to be popular as well. We're trying to do some work in the security area for Java EE 8. We've always had a bunch of security stuff there, but there's been some gaps, some things that could be easier to use than what we've done so far. So we're trying to improve in the security area. What else? There's management. We're also trying to improve management in the management area. So I think we've had a management API for a long time, but it was built on EJB. And as the community is moving away from the sort of remote EJB model to a more of a REST-based model, we'd like to have a management API that takes advantage of that.
So that's a little bit of insight into what's coming up in Java EE 8, but I'm actually more interested personally in Java 9. Anyone want to see what's coming in Java 9? Yeah, a few folks. Or actually beyond Java 9. So I chatted with John Rose a little bit, who is one of the architects.
As machines get bigger and memory gets bigger, it becomes more and more important to be able to put your application's data set in a flat form in memory so you can pick the pieces up all at once. You don't have to do dependent pointer chases. Also, memory compactness becomes important. Both of those influences mean that we want more things like primitives in Java. We want more things that don't always need to be boxed in Java. We want complex numbers that are real for the first time instead of boxed complex numbers, objects. So this leads us to the value types discussion, which is ongoing, and we'll see some fruition, we hope, in JDK 10 and beyond. But the whole idea with value types is we make something that codes like a class, but works like a primitive. And so a complex number or a quaternion or a small transform matrix, all of these things which C programmers use vectors for and small structs, we want that in Java also.
So he's talking a little bit about the upcoming features in Project Valhalla. That's really exciting stuff. I've been trying to twist John's arm to actually come out to Devoxx. So one of these days we're gonna get John out here. So he's really, really awesome. And one of the biggest things, I think, which marks the 20 years of Java is really the Java community, all of you guys. So there's over 300 Java user groups, 9 million Java developers, 150 Java champions, and 50 plus different Jug groups who are contributing to the JCP. And so I need your help. I talked a little bit earlier about stories, about kind of getting started with Java. Do we have a mic that we can pass around? So I need 2 volunteers from the audience who would be interested to share their first experience coding with Java, kind of an anecdote or a short, just a quick 1 minute kind of how did you get started with the Java language to share with the rest of the audience here. And I'm not just going to do this without reward. So you get your pick. You have to choose one. You can either have the book, Raspberry Pi with Java, that tells you how to build the device, or you can have the 3D print, which lets you skip a step. So you can just do the internal hardware, and then you don't actually need a 3D printer to finish the final project in the book. So you get your choice of book or toy. All right. So that also means whoever gives the first anecdote gets an advantage. So who would like to share a story? This guy's very We have several very passionate people.
Okay, works. Well, my first experience was actually in kind of a sub-college. I needed some extra credentials so I could start studying. And the professor we had, he was nice, he was friendly, and one of his very first assignments was doing bubble sort. And I failed it miserably. I honestly can't say that my first impression was too great, not because of Java, but because I just didn't know programming at all. But once I got back and we actually started college with a second professor, he really gave us a sense of completeness, of fun.
Yeah,
just
okay,
not for programming, but also for Java.
That's a really good point. So my first few algorithms classes were all stupid, boring sort algorithms. So we should all ban boring homework assignments in college.
Exactly.
It discourages people from learning programming. So I'm glad you stuck with it. Give them a round of applause. All right, so unfortunately you get to pick. So you have to choose toy or book. Toy, okay. And please.
Yeah. My name is Andre. So I've been a developer even before I used Java. So I developed in C and then C++ and then .NET. And then a friend of mine just said me that there is Java, another language, and I should try it. So I hesitated for a long time. And then I just, I tried it, and for C#, I used Visual Studio. I don't want to sound offensive, but then when I've been trying Java, I've seen IntelliJ IDEA, and yeah, I said that's my language. Right now I'm working at JetBrains.
Those JetBrains
guys. That time I didn't work there, so yeah, that's the most exciting thing about Java.
Okay, I have an interesting story about IntelliJ. So you remember I said that I started out doing an IDE back at CMU. So I was working on this little project. It was actually the old CMU Common Lisp team, and we were building a Java IDE. It was really awesome. It let you do like code refactoring, and you could do pull up lists of fragments, and it was really. We eventually open sourced it when we lost DARPA funding, and I was working on it in my spare time for a while, and then one of my coworkers. Because I would bring it into my different jobs and say, oh, look at my cool little IDE, and then I'd get other people to try it. One of my coworkers showed me IntelliJ. And that was it. That day, I canceled my project. It was it. I couldn't compete. So yeah. Excellent company. Good job. Give them a round of applause. Okay, so I hope you guys have enjoyed the presentation. Happy birthday, Java. 20 years, and here's some cakes to celebrate the 20 years across the world of the Java programming language. So, thank you guys, and I leave you with a present, the Oracle Safe Harbor Statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.